pleasure to see you, and it is really spectacular to connect with someone that is such a pro when it comes to data. And your career is really remarkable. From Bloomberg on, you've always been working at the forefront of data. Could you just take a few minutes and tell us about your career and how you ended up, getting from Bloomberg to where you are now, and kind of your story?
So I got hired into Bloomberg out of NYU when I was doing master in economics, and back then Bloomberg was not a well-known company at all. It was 90 people, and they were hiring their first training class of people right out of college that they wanted to train in the way Bloomberg was doing things, because they had a very, very unique environment in terms of using Fortran, using proprietary database package, using a very unusual or not widely known operating system. So they were hiring specifically people not with computer science backgrounds, and then taking them through the training program. And that first training program I was in, they had a few after that. So that was a very successful hiring mechanism for them. And at the end of the training program, I was assigned into the mortgage team. And there were two of us out of the training program that got assigned, and basically completely randomly, I got assigned mostly data-related tasks, and he got assigned mostly UI tasks. So I kind of fell into data. It was not a grand design. It was not anything I was thinking about that, this is what I want to do with my life. It just, they looked up, and I have no idea why they decided to do it that way and not the other way around. But I got assigned a lot of, as I understand now, back then I didn't have those words, and it was not really even in practice, around data integrity of multitude of the databases that Bloomberg had. And from then on, and I've done some UI work as well. And then as I went on, and I then transitioned to Bear Stearns, and then Thomson Financial and Freddie Mac, I did a lot of data work, but a lot of it was outside of traditional data paths for people, which is data warehousing, data modeling, data analysis, DBA type of work. It was more on how do you effectively use the data to bring applications, capabilities to the business. So I worked like Bear Stearns, it was support of the mortgage trading floor, the same in security sales and trading group and Freddie Mac. I was on the trading floor supporting the traders for the first year and a half of my career in Freddie Mac. And it was a lot around what functionality do you build to support the business needs of the traders. And then I kind of went on there. And again, it was also fairly accidental. I wanted to get into management, and the management position that opened in technology was managing the data team. So, and there were two positions. One of them was managing, and again, it's interesting enough, was managing more of a UI team, and the other one was managing the data team, and they didn't hire me. I didn't get a job on the UI team, and I actually wanted that one more for whatever reasons. I can't even remember the reasons anymore, but I got the job managing the data team, and I've learned a lot. And from then on, I stayed a lot of it in data, but again, a lot of it on how do you effectively use data to bring value to your business.
Well, it's an amazing story, and it highlights so many interesting things that are going on right now. That perspective of the consumption of the data is being the primary thing is sort of antithetical, right? There's a lot of people in data management that kind of come from the sources and think about how to just bring the data together. And maybe, one of my opinions is kind of it's one of the failures for data warehousing and data marts and data lakes has been, it's a lot of data collected, but not in context of consumption. How do you think about like what's going on right now in terms of technologies and new capabilities that are coming out and all the new analytic capabilities that are enabled by data science? Like, how do you feel like we're sort of now thinking about consumption and you have the tools and the infrastructures to deal with consumption?
We do have tools. So the tools are developing. So one of the things that I have noticed that a lot of data disciplines, from data quality, data consumption, data sourcing, data profiling, was very, very immature state till about financial crisis hit. And then with financial crisis and all the regulations that came out of it, between Dodd-Frank, CCAR, it's famously data-driven, to Basel RDA principles, to GPDR, all of that. There was enormous focus on data, and what you had is a lot of focus on the tooling side of it. And you have a significantly larger set of choices around data profiling. And of course, all the data analytics tool and data catalogs, which I think is a wonderful set of tools that not yet reach the potential in terms of how do you effectively use it. This is actually one of the challenges that I see around data catalog, a lot of promise, but not yet the practice on how to do that. But going back to your question around going from the data consumption, this is something that I have had to explain many times in my current jobs and before, because people are really have that idea of enterprise data platforms being built from sources independently of how the data is consumed. And I've been here now at Voya for 2.5 years, and especially around the technology, but business and technology people who haven't had all the scars on my back that I've had from trying to build the data from the sources and not succeeding or not really building for any specific usage. All of us who grew up in that area have those scars. So people who haven't had those go, but your enterprise data, you can just go and bring all the sources in and just integrate it, and it's going to be beautiful. And I go, well, no, not really. It's maybe beautiful, but it's not going to be very useful.
Right.
I'm not a big believer with beauty that has no use. So that still is something that I think we need to communicate and propagate more, that effective enterprise data is building from consumption side. Now, what makes it enterprise is where you have a lot of thinking that needs to happen so it's reusable. Because if you don't want to build silo, I don't want to build enterprise silo of data. Whatever I want to build for the specific use case needs to be fully usable by a similar use case coming from a completely different business area. And that's where you have, that's where a lot of our attention and thinking and like pain is coming from. Is how do you do that, because that's what's making it valuable.
So you're really focused on the reuse of the data in context of the consumable data, not just the raw form. Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit more about the team that you're leading now and what your most important initiatives are and the things you're most excited about?
So I have 3 teams under me now. So there is enterprise data team. I also lead enterprise architecture team for Voya, and I also lead Salesforce Development team for Voya. That's a very interesting combination that works amazingly well, and I'm really excited about having that combination of the teams under me. Of course, I was hired for my data background, and what attracted me to the job and that makes it incredibly interesting is building basically greenfield development for business. So I have done greenfield development, both my jobs at Finred, Citi, at Deutsche Bank, it was developing from scratch. And I like my job in Citi and Deutsche Bank. I don't want to suggest that those were not good jobs. They were excellent jobs. But a lot of the focus on the data was on the regulatory compliance, which was incredibly important because if we weren't able to satisfy regulatory requirements, it was a matter of survival for both Citibank and Deutsche Bank. However, what attracted me significantly to Voya and the business that we are building this reusable enterprise data capabilities to advance the business and to increase the business, to understand our customers better, to bring more customers to Voya. But it's not only for sales, it's also the mission of Voya is retirement, to improve retirement outcomes for American companies, for people. And so a lot of data being used, how do you get people to invest more into their retirement, how to be more secure? So that's an amazing mission for the company, and it makes it much more interesting to bring, to build the data capabilities to do this effectively.
So your mission is not just, sort of a technical one, but is kind of integrated into the core of the product offering for the entire company.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just technical missions aren't particularly interesting. I mean, not the technology isn't interesting, but it is. But it needs to be, again, I'm going back to my roots. It's how do you effectively use the data to promote business goals, business strategy of the company. And that's what made the job at Voya very interesting. And so we've been building this out. It's been 2.5 years, and it's been a very interesting and challenging journey of establishing this reusable data capabilities. And we're well on our way, and I think we're doing very well. One of the projects that's coming up that's really exciting for me, it's actually an intersection of all three teams. And that's data-driven distribution. We recently hired an executive on our investment management business to drive data-driven distribution for investment management. And that's where all three of my teams are working together, from enterprise architecture, of course, establishing the architectural principles and data integration tooling and principles, my Salesforce team on CRM data, and my data team to bring a mastered intermediary and organization data to support our CRM strategy and to support distribution analytics. And that is incredibly exciting. This project is kicking off in the next couple of weeks, and all three teams are just really ready to go and start working that.
Wow, it sounds really challenging. So, what are the things that you're wrestling with as you do such a big project that integrates so many different people and teams? What are the biggest challenges that you're going to face, and what are you most worried about?
Well, as always in data projects, and it's not only at Voya, it's pretty much every time I've had a data-driven job, the biggest challenges are cultural. So
the
technology,
human stuff.
it's a human stuff. Yes, it's humans. It's not technical challenges. I mean, there are technical challenges, and also, but you also have much better tooling to address technical challenges now. It's a cultural shift. It's a cultural shift to think about about the underlying data, about how we do operations for any business unit that enables reusable data assets. And it goes back, for example in Citi that we always had, we called it our motherhood and apple pie slide. And it showed that every business pretty much has the data they need at the data quality level that they need it. It's when you want to bring the data together and use it across multiple business lines, then when you run into problems where you need data management, data governance, and reusable data asset. But to get there, it needs to be a priority change on the business line side. And that's a human problem. That's a business process problem. It's a cultural problem. It's who owns the data, who is accountable for data, and accountability from front to back. So that's always been, in all of my career, the biggest challenge that you have in data. And it doesn't matter what tools we have. We can have tools, and we do have tools to make data quality more transparent, data definition easier to manage, to consume the data once you have it, easier to integrate the data, to use machine learning and AI to recognize data patterns. All of that exists, so all of that is easier. The culture, that's hard.
I get it. When I was managing data over at data engineering over at Novartis's research group, we used to describe every lab was like its own island of data, and getting them to share, collaborate, or even align their data was the biggest problem, this human problem. So what are the tools? Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you get people to believe that it's worth it to change in the interest of sort of serving this broader, bigger data asset?
Well, slowly. Slowly. A lot of it is communication. And a lot of it, again, it goes from consumption. So I can go in the beginning, 2.5 years ago, when we started the Data Foundation Initiative and when we made a business case for it to be funded. A lot of it was, it's a mess right now and it's going to be so much better after we're done. But a lot of it was what I call hand-waving, because there was nothing in place, there was no proof. It was just words, right? Words, and of course, the history that I have that I brought to the job. But again, so in 2.5 years, you go from consumers and you go, here is how, so we've built a little bit and now it's used and it's making somebody's life a little bit easier. And now if only on the business side, we change the operational process and make it a little bit better, there is a better outcome here. And interestingly enough, the COVID pandemic, what we are going through right now, made it actually easier.
Really? How so?
Surprisingly enough.
How
well,
so?
Everything is becoming much more digital. So analog experiences, so we would probably, well, I don't know, but if we weren't in this situation, weren't all sitting at home, we probably would have been doing this in person. We wouldn't be relying on all kinds, on this platform, which I would much rather mind you do it in person than do it over Zoom, but that's a different conversation. But a lot of communications are much more digital right now. Because people don't want, there is no physical way. There is really letters, used to be. Now that we know there isn't transmission of services, it's not as much, but in the beginning, letters were suspect as well. So a lot of communication is digital. Also, situation was changing and is changing now with such, so quickly that you need your analytics much quicker. So the old infrastructures, the reports that used to come out once a month, because it took 3 days to 5 days to load the data, and then another 15 days to clean the data, and then another 15 days to run the reports. Now a business asks for data much more often, and now you want to go back into history. Majority of the data warehouse, unless it's very difficult to build history. This is one of the most difficult things enterprise data warehouse does, figuring out how do you build history. And a lot of existing data assets don't, and now you want to have that because you want to see how people's behavior changed on a much more detailed level. So actually that's helping also to get people to understand that underlying data and enterprise data capabilities are very important to get the analytics, to get the business reporting that we want.
That's a really interesting topic. So can you talk a little bit about like this idea of like data lineage and provenance and like, I know you've done a lot of that in your career and arguably, in financial services is like the cutting edge of this. And I think that a benefit is, hearing for other people in other industries to hear how you've been dealing with and managing data lineage and provenance in your projects.
So data lineage is a very challenging subject that I find. I have worked in and around data lineage all the time back from Citi. And if you have a legacy companies, and majority of the companies are legacy, or they have a large footprint going in back many years, they usually have spaghetti code or spaghetti diagram. When you go to data flows, that's the best example that you can give. It's a spaghetti diagram. And if you want to do the lineage by hand, it's pretty much impossible. Because by the time you finish documenting all of your flows, the changes they're not true anymore. The changes have been made, now you're on and you need to start all over again. And it's enormous amount of investment and money that need to be spent to keeping it up to date and never really get to the full picture. There is some tooling out there that kind of tells you that it can discover lineage through code crawling or connection scrolling, and we have tried to do that at Deutsche Bank. And it works to a certain degree. There's some limitations on how much it can do and how complicated it is. There is also some process changes you can make then when you keep track of your changes using your usual SDLC. What I have found the most effective way of dealing with the lineage is to build from metadata-driven architecture. So the environment that we are building here in Voya is actually self-documenting. So of course we have documentation because you can't really build ETL jobs if you don't have the lineage documentation. This attribute goes here, and this is transformations. But as we develop and as we bring more and more, just inevitably, it doesn't mean how much discipline we have. The documentation is gonna fall behind.
So is this, make sure I've got this right. So what you're describing to me feels like something like Swagger for data. Is that a fair?
What do you mean by Swagger?
Swagger is the automatically generated documentation for APIs. As you build APIs, it sort of automatically publishes the document.
That's not. That's an interesting thought, and I will take it back to my team, and I will we'll talk about that and see if we can do that. But actually, what I talk about is that everything you build generates metadata that gets saved. So we build a product that brings raw data into data lake.
Mm-hmm.
It generates metadata when it brings that data in, and it saves it in metadata repository. So any transmission, every single transmission, you see how many attributes went, what were the attributes on the source system, what were the attributes when it landed. Obviously, all the ETL tools have that. All the modern ETL tools tell you that.
Right.
So we, in our tool that we're distributing the data, we're exactly the same. It generates metadata as it works. Not as a documentation at the beginning, which you need to, not marking documentation, but generating as you move data, generating metadata what you've moved. To me, that's the only way to effectively do lineage.
So it's the continuous generation of the metadata and all the changes that are reflected in that repository that then you can go back and prosecute that as a tool to understand lineage. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Have you done that effectively? I mean, it sounds like you've been practicing this. Like, have you been able to make it work?
Well, that's one of the design principles for the enterprise data platform that we're building at Voya. So within the platform, we have made it work. Now, of course, now there is a huge environment before us and then after us. So then you go back to the combination of things. So everything that you build is new. You build based on that principle. Everything, and then you do combination of documentation and SDLC changes, and that's where owning enterprise architecture and architectural review and the process for controlling the changes and what information projects have to put in when they create the change. That way it's helped. So you have a combination of things.
So it sounds like your mandate is much bigger than data. Again, it sort of crosses over into product, but also into the overall technical architecture supporting the entire company.
Yeah, enterprise architecture is outside. It's not only data, it's overall enterprise architecture for Voya, so including architecture governance, including our technology and application landscape. And one of the more interesting efforts that I've been part of, that's been led by our enterprise architecture team, is our public cloud journey. So I'm learning a lot from all parts of the company, from our security team and our infrastructure team and my enterprise architecture team, is how do you take the company of Voya's footprint to the cloud. We're not there yet, so it's still work in progress. So
tell me more about that. I mean, there's a lot of people that are curious about how they're going to get to the cloud, and is now the right time, and whether what stage are you at? You said you're taking your first steps, and do you have stuff running natively in the cloud yet? And are you running experiments, or do you have stuff in production?
Well, yes to all of this. We have some pieces that run on the cloud. We have we have POCs. We have, from data perspective, we're doing quite a bit on the cloud, or we're planning to. It's still not in production. So we have, Voya has multi-cloud footprint between SaaS applications as well. Majority of the company, I mentioned Salesforce. That's a SaaS. Workday, that's a SaaS. There is tons of apps out there. People don't even realize that they are on the cloud. So on the public cloud, I think now is an excellent time to go to public cloud. It's not bleeding edge anymore. So it's not, you have security on the cloud. You have incredibly good people. All of the public clouds, three major public clouds, invest incredible amount of money into security, because obviously any security breach would be front page news, and it's huge impact on their business. So from the security perspective, while you of course have to pay attention to security, and we work very closely with the CISO and our security team at Voya, it's been very well developed and it's quite mature. From the public cloud perspective, it offers a lot of new capabilities to take business forward, and as companies get to the cloud, that's an edge that you have. That eventually, right now, it's an edge. In a couple of years, it would be table stakes.
Wow. So a couple of years.
I may be over, But so think about what I've heard recently from one of the consultants in that space, was that to think about transition from on-prem to the cloud the same way we thought about from mainframe to client server.
Gotcha.
Right? So it's not cost per se. Though there is a cost structure there as well that potentially could be very favorable on the cloud, but it's new capabilities. It's ability to bring more to the business from technology perspective to support business growth. And then eventually it becomes, you can't hire people who know how to do stuff on-prem. Everybody wants to work on the cloud. How many COBOL programmers can you hire currently?
Right.
I mean, I know my father, who is a COBOL programmer, still is getting calls. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about all those people that are used to racking and stacking servers, inside of these data centers, and 10 years from now it'll be less important, or they'll all work for Amazon. What are of the existing cloud vendors, from a data practitioner's perspective, of the existing cloud vendors, which of the vendors are you, do you like the most, or are there strengths and weaknesses between GCP, AWS, and Azure? Things that you prefer?
There is such a tight competition between three of them that if any one of them is ahead on any one capability at any moment, the other one or the other two will catch up very quickly and then step ahead of one. So I feel that it's less of an issue of which cloud is good for each specific purpose. It's more overall what makes sense for you as a company. And I also generally suggest not to spend a lot of time figuring out which cloud, because whatever the situation is right now, whatever the capability is right now, the other cloud is going to catch up soon. So it's more about where you have relationship, where do you have service, what's coming out in terms of the cost perspective, what's your current stack. There are a lot of other criteria that will get you which cloud, but I think spending a lot of time figuring out which one's ahead, it's kind of, by the time you finish figuring it out, the other two clouds will catch up.
So it's kind of great for us as customers, right, to be able to consume that. Like, they're just going to compete and drive the costs down, and you get to. You're saying there's really going to be parity in terms of the features. Over time.
I think I'm sure, and I don't want to endorse any one vendor, so I'm not going to speak about what I'm seeing specifically for each of the vendors. But again, whatever it is at the moment I'm speaking right now, let's say, and I'm completely making it up, AWS has made great strides in analytical tool set. And right now that's really important, and that's my criteria. By the time I finish making my criteria and we sign the contract and we build the landing zone, Azure is going to be right there, if not slightly ahead. Right? And then Amazon is going to catch up and build something over there, and then Azure will develop. So it's really, I don't think it's capability question. I think it's more what makes sense from the relationship intangible, what kind of stack you have, what makes it easier, where do you have more. Are the vendors that you're using, any of your SaaS apps that you have footprint, are they running on any one of those public clouds?
Gotcha. So and tell me how you think about multi-cloud. Is that something that's worth factoring in at the beginning of the journey to the public cloud, or is it do you have to kind of build it in from day one, or can you kind of think about having multiple cloud providers over time?
Well, the reality of it that we are on multi-cloud, not just Voya. Pretty much everybody who has any cloud footprint is on multi-cloud, because again, we have SaaS apps. Even the companies that are not at all thinking about public cloud, just don't want to go there, I'm pretty sure they probably have either Workday or Salesforce or something like that.
Right.
So they are on the cloud and they're on-prem. So that's already, or you have private cloud, which is, so reality that majority of the companies are already on multi-cloud. Now, if you want to be evenly on multi-cloud, meaning that you can switch from one cloud to another cloud seamlessly as a DR, or in case something happens, that's an investment. And companies need to think about it. It's a significant investment to build out both infrastructures, because they're not the same. If you want to take advantage of native capabilities on whatever cloud you're on, then it's not an easy transition to a different cloud. If you want to take advantage of some of platform as a service on top of the cloud, that's an investment. That's more expensive. You're paying to the cloud and you're paying for PaaS. So that will allow you presumably to switch. We haven't tried that. So I actually never tried that. So I don't know, but that's a selling point of PaaS, that you can switch containers from one place to another place.
Yeah.
But again, that's more expensive. Or you have to develop in a way that's neutral of underlying cloud capabilities. Well, then you lose on underlying cloud capabilities. So as always, there isn't one way, or there isn't a magic bullet there that you can just do and, oh, I can run on any cloud. It's investment that companies need to make, and they need to understand whether the outcome or the value from that type of investment is worth the amount of money that that's going to take on the ongoing basis.
Well, and what about some of the traditional sort of high-end on-prem workloads? Like I think of the kind of workloads that I used to run on Teradata, you know, and such. Do you see those kinds of workloads moving over onto public cloud? You know,
I think so.
or you know, like the Snowflake guys are really popular right now, and Databricks on the data science. Like, do you see sort of so these Teradata-like workloads actually moving, or Exadata-like workloads kind of moving over anytime soon?
I think so. I don't know in terms of how quickly that's going to happen, because again, we haven't run a lot of performance tests on the cloud. So like Snowflake is absolutely one of the things that they are, that the feature of Snowflake is spinning up as many computes against the storage. So that gets you the performance. Well, again, how cost effective, what is it exactly you're running? Again, and also what I would want to think about is, I think is not the right way of applying. I think if you just, whatever infrastructure or whatever data footprint or application running, if you just move it from your data center to the cloud, you're kind of missing an opportunity. So there is a lot of re-engineering and refactoring of the application's state or architecture to take full advantage of the cloud.
Gotcha. So in addition to the cloud, what are the other big changes that you see happening in data management in the next 3 to 5 years? Like, are there patterns that you're seeing and or tech that you like, or things that you think are going to be important and useful?
The tech that I would like to see more of, and we're at the beginning of this, I think, with catalogs, but as I said, I think with the catalogs, we still don't know. It's very cool technology. I still don't know if we have an effective way of using it to really bring the value. But the tech I would really like to see. So the hardest part in building a data environment is not bringing data in. It's integrating data and finding common keys. If you
common keys,
if you have one data set, you can run all kinds of analytics on it, and it's fine. But if you have two data sets that you want to relate to each other, you need to find your common key. And they're not going to be standardized the same way. They're going to have different code values. They're going to have different identifiers. And that's where a lot of work from my team, or from anybody really, all the analytics team, I think are spending a lot of time figuring out common keys. So a lot of data prep business, and Alteryx, Paxata, others, is all about finding data common keys without having to do ETL and doing it programmatically. And doing it on the fly. And of course, doing it on the fly, you have problems because you do it one way, and then somebody else comes against the same data set and does it differently, and you get, get different numbers on the same set of data. So where I would really like to see more growth and more development, and where I think the machine learning really comes in, or artificial intelligence, those different things, but to find common keys easier, to identify. So the data integration remains the most difficult problem, other than culture problem that I spoke about, technical problem that you have. Now, you can actually, and that's what we've tried in City, try to solve for data integration problem culturally, meaning institute common keys and enforce having standardized common keys, standardized valid values, and do it all the way from the data ingestions all the way through. That's a huge culture change. I think it's actually going to be easier to do it with the tools and the backend. With the culture, especially in the large companies. Now, maybe in the smaller companies, especially with the new ones, they can start that way from the beginning. That might be better. However, I've been told by people who are in those types of companies that they're in such a hurry that discipline doesn't exist to begin with, because you have to spend more time doing it.
Yeah.
And they don't have any time because they're racing to get the next level of funding.
Yeah.
So,
and God forbid you go out and you buy another company, and then you've got like,
then you have the same problem all over again. So right. I think tech might help it a lot more. And that's where I would like to see development, is the data integration common keys problem.
The common keys problem. It's near and dear to our hearts at Tamr, where we try and get people to use the machine aggressively with some human expertise. And have you found yourself in a battle? One of the battles that I had was like getting sort of people competing to be the common key, right? That you had one group that had a key that they really liked their key, and they wanted to see that key adopted as the primary across the back to these human problems. Have you experienced that?
Quite a bit, yes, in City. So that was, for the first 2 years, that was my job in City.
Really?
So
really?
Identifying, so that was trying to address in data integration common keys problem top down. So define what the common key is, and then get everybody to adopt it all the way back to the source systems. So the first problem was exactly what you just spoke about. Obviously, everybody has their own common keys, and they don't want to change, and they want everybody else to use theirs.
Right. My key's the best. Why doesn't everybody use it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So golden source for client data, golden source for org data, golden source for country data, golden source. So the way we try to get around it. So of course, there is always somebody who yells the loudest or has the most support from the management. Let's be real, that's always a consideration. We try to put a little bit more process and structure around it, so somewhat more objective criteria of what would be authoritative source of data. So anywhere from what's your data coverage. So if you have an excellent key for 10% of securities that the company trades, and to get another 90% is going to take you 5 years, you're probably not the most effective common key. Right? Or if you have a common key that's not easily extensible, or you're not using industry identifiers or whatever. So there is that setup. And then there is a set of how's your change management. If somebody wants, in addition to common keys, usually those are repositories that have other information about whatever the entity that you have a common key for. So if you have organizational entity, you have things like industry codes, for example. So do you have a coverage of that type of data? And if there is a consumer of this data that needs an additional piece of information and you don't have it, how long is it going to take you to get it? What's the line out of your door? Is it going to take you 6 to 12 months? Because if it's 6 to 12 months, you're probably not a good candidate for being enterprise common key. So that's what we have tried to do, is to have to come to an agreement what would constitute an authoritative source. And it goes from technical to change management criteria, and then have that agreement in, and then use that as a criteria to say, out of that many people who have something like common keys, we're going to narrow it down. So did it always work? No, but it helped. It helped.
Well, it seems you've done this in practice, and based on our experience at Tamr, we just see a lot of companies that are just beginning the journey of even considering doing this kind of work. And it's amazing to hear the stories about doing this in practice at large scale. Seems very, very challenging. What about integrating third-party data? How do you think about that at Voya, and how have you seen that done in the past? Obviously a completely different set of issues involved when you have lots of third-party data coming in versus data you're generating internally. What are the practices around third-party data that you think are most effective?
Well, have a lot of leverage with your data supplier helps a great deal. The best way to integrate third-party data is when you can provide or there is either the common format or industry accepted, the layout, industry accepted definition, data dictionary, and so on. Or you can say, here is how we want the data from you. The first job that I talked about when I started managing data, That was actually reference data, pool level data coming from multiple external suppliers. So that's where, if I cut my teeth on managing data, enterprise data environment is loading external data in for mortgage security, single class and multi-class. I don't know how many people here, in this audience will remember Intex data set. I think it's probably still there. It was an interesting data set to work with. So I think one of the easiest or one of the ways that really help to deal with the external data is to have industry standards. So you at least somewhat get past that problem of common keys. Again, common keys is back to that, because you have data dictionaries, usually external data, you have pretty good data dictionaries that go with that. But again, the work of, if you want to work this data set with the other one, you go back to the same problem. So well-defined data dictionaries, that's not in here. It's, I think, on your side.
I think it is on my side.
Are you in Boston?
Sorry. Yes, Cambridge, yes.
All right. Yeah, I'm in New York. No, that's okay. I'm just like, I don't think it's here. Well-defined data dictionaries, well-defined data quality rules, accountability on the part of vendor to define and provide data quality information, and accountability to fix data quality on the data has not come through. How successful you are with that, it depends. But from my experience, that's pretty much the only thing that helps. It's following the industry standards and having well-defined data dictionary, and making sure the vendor accepts full accountability for data quality and for fixing data quality in a reasonable time frame.
So in the data standards in financial services, I mean, you've had lots of experience with this. Like, do you feel like there are standards that have worked well, and are there reasons you think that they've worked well, or ones that are particularly bad, and why they may have failed?
I think so definition of the standards, and it's actually the same either financial, external industry standard or internal, for example, for city. Definition of the standard is difficult work where you have to have a lot of parties come together and agree on the standard. However, the hard part is adoption of the standard. So LEI standard, for example, and it's been a while since I've been kind of in the midst of LEI work, and I think you have women on your list that actually much more in depth on that. So I'm very much kind of an outsider on that. But what I have seen, standards itself is pretty good. It's adoption of the standard by a wide variety of companies. So, and there is a requirement that I think there is a requirement that to trade, you need to have an LAI identifier, but a lot of small companies don't need to. And then if you're trying to source this data and have LAI identify as your common key, you have a pretty large footprint that does not have that. So that's the problem. I think it's not so much creation of the standard. It's adoption of that standard by broad enough community, so it's actually valuable, and it doesn't become yet another key that you have to build a mapping against.
Yeah, it's at some level, like these standards can make the problem worse, not better, right?
Well, yeah, it's yet another, I think on the security side, like ISIN, QSIPs, those are pretty good standards. I mean, they're pretty prevalent, and they have a reasonably good coverage. Of course, QSIP would be better if they didn't reuse the QSIPs, but that's my personal pet peeve.
Right. Yeah. It's every one of these things has they're like physics to it, right? There are strengths and weaknesses associated with them and how they're designed. So a little bit more on the personal side, as you think about your career and going, this is kind of like the age of data is kind of happening, and you're sort of at the center of it. How do you think, about the next, 3 to 5 to 10 years of your career, and the kinds of things you're most interested in? So
I don't think, I'm really enjoying right now that I'm not only doing data, I'm also responsible for enterprise architecture and Salesforce. And I think my background in data, especially in terms of digital transformation, so if you think around digital transformation, the way I define digital transformation is removing of friction in operations of the company. all the way from communication with the customers, all the way back to financial reporting. So it's end-to-end. It's not only UX experience of the customer, but it's operational experience, it's a financial reporting experience, it's analytics experience. So it's removing of the friction. And removing friction that we usually have is manual work to enter data, to remove data, to move things around. And that's why I think my background of understanding how the data moves and what do you need to do to make it frictionless comes into place. So that's something that I'm looking forward to be able to do it on a broader scale. Similar to what the plans we have around the Salesforce projects that we have, again, removing a lot of manual intervention to normalize how we deal with data, to provide much broader reporting using both Salesforce data, external data, third-party data, other internal data from Voya to improve our business outcomes, taking it on a broader scale. So I think it's a lot of what I would like to do in the next 3 to 5 years. In 10 years, I'm hoping I'll be retired as in teaching.
Okay.
That's what I would like to get to, is just to take it broader, that not only building the data platform, but looking at it end to end.
Well, it seems like the time has come that people with the data backgrounds are especially like yourself with the focus on consumption, providing the context for how and why we should organize our enterprise architecture to generate and manage data as an asset. I mean, it's really very unique position you're in, and this has really been an amazing conversation. You're an inspirational leader, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk today. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you, Andy. This has been wonderful.